Welcome into episode 382 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. For the second time this season, the Boston Bruins get a 4-3 overtime win over the Calgary Flames. Similar fashions, but kind of opposite. Back on November 7th, it was Calgary who came back from being down 3-1 in the third to force overtime. The Bruins and Brad Marchand got the win there. And then last night, it was the Bruins who came back on the road from down 3-1 in the third, but it was them who actually were able to find a way to get the victory on a David Pastrnak overtime goal. Bridget and Scott, let's get right into the opening shifts.
Yeah, I guess I'll start because my opening shift has to do with the comeback, the turnaround in that game, and I guess the turnaround of the road trip in general. First 30 minutes of that game were just a disaster. You heard Elias Lindholm in the first intermission basically say, everything we were doing well against Vancouver that helped us win, we're not doing today. He called it sloppy. Like he gave a very candid interview in the first intermission about how bad they were playing.
He said it was brutal. He said it can't get worse than this, which he was wrong about. But
because then they gave up 2 goals in the first 2 minutes of the second period. But he said, "We're lucky it's still 0-0." And when I looked at the stats, they had only spent 2 minutes and 40 seconds in their offensive zone in the first period. Like they spent most of the game, or most of the first 30 minutes, I would say, at the other end of the ice defending their net. So they give up the first 2 early in the second period. Then about halfway through the second, things started to click. Scott, this connects to your opening shifts. We can get into why they started to look better. Did have to do with a little bit.
No, I was gonna go a different direction with my opening shift. Yeah, I think you're referring to Sacco changing up the lines, moving Coyle up to the second line, and dropping Brazo down to a third line with Kaslik and Frederic. And yeah, that did work. I would also say Sacco deserves credit for that timeout after the second goal, because I thought they started to play better even before. Like midway through, I thought it kind of started right after that timeout, and then they gave up the goal late in the period, and that sort of erased some of that. But yeah, for my opening shift though, I was going to take the Bruin who scored the tying goal in the third, and that was Marc McLaughlin, who now has 2 goals in his last 2 games. And the reason I wanted to bring him up is because this is going to be an interesting next few days for the Bruins and Marc McLaughlin. He's now at 8 games played since he was called up. So once you get to 10, you require waivers to be sent back down. So the Bruins either have to send him down before he plays 2 more games, which, I would say his play hasn't really warranted that, or they're probably committing to him for a little bit longer of a period of time here to be in Boston if they keep him beyond that, because I think the way he's played would certainly at least raise the possibility of another team claiming him if you tried to get him through waivers. So they're at 14 forwards right now, which is, the most you see any NHL team carry, following the addition of Oliver Wahlstrom. Tyler Johnson's still around, even though he's now been a healthy scratch in, I think, 7 of the last 8 games. So you kind of wonder if, certainly as it relates to McLaughlin, is something going to give here. But even as it relates to that group in general, it's hard enough to get 13 forwards playing time, never mind 14. So I'm interested in what the Bruins do in these next few days, and interested in what you guys think they should do, which we can get to in a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say Marc McLaughlin has 6 goals in his 22 career NHL games in a, playing those games in a 4th line role. So we've talked about it before. He's a player who he seems to take advantage of limited opportunities he's got in Boston, and yeah, we'll definitely continue to talk about him. My opening shift is somebody that you guys mentioned earlier during the first intermission interview, which is Elias Lindholm. I thought he was noticeably good last night. Very, very effective, making things happen. He was dangerous. That's the word I would describe him. He looked dangerous last night. Now in the third period, I believe he drew the only minor penalty in the game on a play where bit of a ticky-tack call could go either way. But I do think that play, he could have just released it, and he could have been more dangerous in that play, is my point. But by and large, I thought he had a really solid game. And, guys, he has 4 points of his 16, so 25% of his points this year coming against his former teams in Vancouver and Calgary. So if I'm the Bruins, I'm clamoring just to have them play those teams all year if they can. I don't know if the CBA would allow that, but they could try.
Next year if they could make a deal or something.
Yeah.
Travel's going to turn into a real pain with that schedule.
It's a little bit expensive, probably. You rack up some miles, maybe get some rewards points. But yeah, no, that'd be pretty. That's far. But Brian, you're right. Like, he was noticeably more intense, and I had written it. I don't have internet at my house, so these are my notes from yesterday. I'm currently recording from my brother's apartment.
Is that pen and ink? Is that a feather for that?
Yeah, there was a feather and an inkwell, but no. So I had wrote down in my.
We're just like sitting by candlelight.
Up here are all my like key takeaways, and I wrote Lindholm playing with more intensity. Playing with intensity, he hasn't had desperation in the third. A few scoring chances, like he genuinely looked like he had an extra gear that he hit. Which you're questioning, why hasn't he hit those in other games? And can he kind of take that and do it again? Because if he can, he'll be much more effective. He was driving that line at times, and a lot of times, not that he's a passenger earlier in the season when he's out there, but he's just kind of more of he's quiet, like he'll facilitate, but there definitely was something else to his game that was really good. And maybe that's also why he gave that interview in the first intermission. Like, he was just being himself. He was just going for it. And I don't know. I enjoyed watching him when he was playing like that.
Well, yeah, he does not sugarcoat things, and which is refreshing. Like, as someone in the media, you like guys who do that and don't just talk in cliches.
What do you mean, get pucks deep?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Bridget, he even said at one point early in the season, and this speaks to both the brutal honesty and the not making enough of an impact. He said it felt like there were times he was just going out there skating up and down the ice and not doing much. And last night, definitely not one of those nights. 7 shots on goal for him, season high. Also matched his season high from all of last year. So yeah, just a much more assertive player. And it's everyone who, you talk or you hear people like Brick or Bob Beers talk about his season, and they will talk about all the little things that he does that stands out to them. And I think that we all see as well, whether it is ending plays in the defensive zone, being in good support positions, obviously winning a lot of key faceoffs. By the way, Bruins were dominant on faceoffs Tuesday night against the bad faceoff team, admittedly. But it's that's all great, and that gives him a certain kind of base level of okay, at least he's going to do that stuff and not hurt you all that much. But you still need the offense. He's here to contribute offensively as well, and you need that. You just can't have a top 2 center who isn't involved offensively. So it was great to see. And his goal, he almost kind of whiffed at first, but ends up flipping it past. And then I like the assist even more. He takes a hit to make a good pass to Marchand to send him into the zone. And it ended up with one of my favorite statistical anomalies, which is a point on a goal, but not a plus, because he changed off before the puck went in the net. So
wow.
Little interesting tidbit.
Now would that also, those anomalies also happen on power plays too, right?
Well, yeah. So yeah, I guess it's like a 5-on-5 anomaly.
But 5-on-5 anomaly, yeah. No, Scott, that was a great assist, and there was a lot of purpose to that pass, a lot of zip to it. Yeah, his goal was a little bit fortuitous on the puck was rolling on edge, and it was kind of one of those one of those goofy goals, but he showed that burst of speed in neutral zone to collect that loose puck.
Well,
he also
and he started. Yeah,
he blocked Kadri's shot that bounced it to Marchand, then got up ice, and broke away.
Absolutely. And in addition
which
to
I guess Marchand never actually touched that puck because he didn't get an assist on it. It was just Lindholm unassisted.
I saw that it said unassisted, but I mean, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. Like, it bounced to Marchand. And then,
yeah, I think he might have like whiffed. Like, it was still a bouncing puck, so maybe he didn't actually make contact.
Well, how did it get out there then?
Yeah, I think
so. It did hit the Calgary player, so
okay.
I don't know.
No, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. So in addition to doing the little things, Scott, that Lindholm does, even if he's not producing, you're right. But one element to his game that he's historically had that just appeared to be lacking at many times this year was he's also a player who plays with a bit of an edge and isn't afraid to make enemies out there. And I think that when you're seeing Lindholm playing on his toes and playing confident and engaged, he's doing all three of those things. He's scoring, he's doing the little things, and he's got like I said, a little bit of an edge to his game. And what do I mean by edge? I'm not saying he's going in there and fighting guys, but like you'll notice him give a guy a little bit of a shoulder on the back check, like just behind the play, just little things that just kind of add up. That they're very subtle, but yeah, it's a sign of a confident player. So right now, guys, he's at 16 points in 33 games. Is it starting to appear now where now that the points are starting to come again? I think he's still on pace for like low 40s. That's not nearly what we were hoping. But again, if he's able to go on like a point streak here for 5 or 6 games and maybe add another 5 or 6 points, and that pace can start to increase. So do you think that Bruins fans can start to look at him if he has a big couple of weeks here with a little bit less animosity maybe building inside of them, and maybe he's looking like a player more like they hoped he could be for them, which is probably a fringe 1 center, but a good 2 center production wise?
Yeah, I think if he does start to build like that, then absolutely. Like, it was such a slow start that I feel like we're almost going to have to not ignore, but, if he finishes well, like if he plays well the rest of the way, or especially the second half of the season, yeah, it might end up at 45 points and that looks bad. But it's like, at that point, though, the slow start would be so far behind you. You'd be like, okay, well, how did he finish? And then if you're in the playoffs, how does he do in the playoffs? Like, there's still a lot of opportunity for him to, maybe not like fully swing people to be like, wow, this is a great contract. Thank God they didn't give up on him after 2 months. But at least swing people to be like, okay, I at least see like the player he should be. And I at least see that he's better than what we saw those first 25, 30 games, whatever. But, it's got to be more than the 1 game. Like, we do actually have to see that build happen now, because it was his first goal in 12 games. And like, again, he's not a player who should have an 11 game goal drought at any point, really. He's too good. Like, throughout his career, like, he is good at like finding soft spots and getting open and taking a shot when it's there, and he has a pretty good shot. So he's just not a guy who should be going 11 games without a goal. And like, you see him have like I said, 7 shots on goal Tuesday, and it's like, he's not going to do that every night, but like, there's no reason he can't have 3 or 4 almost every night.
Yeah, and I mean, you remember what my prediction was to start, our bold predictions to start the season was like him and Pasternak were going to light the world on fire together, and they haven't done that. And in fact, they're not on the same line anymore. But but it comes down to the chemistry, like him just still kind of finding his way with his new team. I feel like we haven't seen him settle in yet for whatever reason completely. So and can probably say that about most guys that are coming to a new team. But we're at the point where hopefully this kind of game maybe gets him heading in the right direction. Geeky also scored again. So it's been good to see him start to produce. And him being with Pasta for whatever reason always tends to work out okay. Like there's times where they find each other. They have some sort of built-in chemistry that since they started playing together. But to go back to McLaughlin, guys, because he's the reason why they win this game. Like this comeback, there was a lot of times they could have scored the third goal, but the guy who does score the game-tying goal is McLaughlin. And without him, the rest of the good play in the final 30 minutes of the game, it goes, all for nothing because they would have lost and they wouldn't have had a chance to go to overtime. So McLaughlin just plays hard. Like he just followed up his shot. And I guess the main thing that we wanted to talk about with him is should he still be with the team? Or though I do think that the answer to should he still be with the team and will he still be with the team are two different answers.
Yeah, on that goal, like Joe Sacco said after the game, Mark just crashes the net there and stays with it. This is a second effort league, and it was a good second effort by Mark. And that's exactly right, because like he actually kind of like pretty much whiffs on the first attempt. Marchand sets him up for a one-timer in the slot, and I don't know if there might have been a little interference from a defender's stick or not, but he kind of heals it, but then it comes right back to him off Rasmus Anderson's stick, who just couldn't handle the puck. A little bit of hot potato there, but you create your bounce. Like the Bruins got a fortunate bounce on the second goal as well. Loride breaks his stick on a one-timer, but it goes perfectly to Peak, pinching down the back door, and now you have a scoring chance. So you create your luck, though, by taking control of the game and putting pressure on and being in the offensive zone and being around the net, which they were on both of those goals. So, yeah, as it relates to McLaughlin, like I think the defense had been there. I think that fourth line was doing a good job defensively. He's not the most physical player in the world, but I do think there's been an uptick in his physical play from other times we've seen him in Boston. And now you get the goals, which I said before, like fourth line has to be able to contribute, when they get some chances. They can't be zeros offensively. So now you have him there doing that. And like, I just think like all things being equal, if you're talking about like which forward should go out of this group, it's like, well, McLaughlin's playing and playing effectively. And Tyler Johnson, the one game he's played in the last 8 was a -4 with an offensive zone penalty. And it's like, I don't know, which guy's helping you win more right now? Like,
yeah,
kind of an easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned a few weeks ago, or when he was first called up, McLaughlin, I'm talking about that, skating wise, he just seemed to be a little bit behind the play. And I feel like my assessment at the time was honest. And I think it was, I'm not saying it was inaccurate, at least in my mind at the time, but I do think that he does enough little things right over the course of play. He's a very smart player, and he does have a incredible work ethic, as you saw on that goal. I also think that with production comes confidence, and then there's a little bit more pep in your step, and you start to figure things out. I mean, I shouldn't forget the fact that it is a jump to go from the minors to the NHL, and maybe there's just some games it takes to kind of acclimate to that. So I've always liked McLaughlin, not simply for the last name. But I just think that he's somebody
thanks, Brian.
who has always, since his debut game, I think against New Jersey 3 years ago, like he's just always been somebody who you've wanted to root for. And so I agree. Like even on that fourth line, like I think he's like, I would even look at maybe if I had to, take somebody out of the lineup. I mean, I know it's a different position, but like I feel like McLaughlin's affecting the game more than Koepke at this moment. I'm not trying to, dismiss anything Koepke's doing, but I just don't think that you take a guy out of the lineup or send him down when he's certainly on a goal streak. But as far as the personnel decisions, I feel like there's a bit of a cluster right now in the middle six personnel wise, because currently you do have Tyler Johnson, who I think all of us here would be okay with a little bit of a wave if need be. And then you just brought in Oliver Wahlstrom, who is sitting on the ninth floor at the moment. And I also want to bring up quickly, guys, Trent Frederic, because there was some chatter about him over the last couple of days, starting with Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, where he says there are definitely some teams out there that feel the Bruins and Trent Frederic won't be able to get a deal done. But I was really warned about saying that. And then Mike Grinelli from Spit and Chicklets quote tweeted that, saying, "I've heard the Bees and Frederic aren't even in the same stratosphere for a contract yet. Who knows what will happen, but sounds like they aren't close as of now." So I bring that up because I mentioned online that if the Bruins and Frederic are not close on a contract and they're not going to re-sign the player, playoff bound or not, the Bruins should probably try to deal him for any return. And most people agreed with that sentiment. I did have one individual in particular mention, well, you could treat him as a rental and your own rental, and then you're not losing him for nothing because in the offseason, if you don't resign him, because you would get that cap space. But I mean, I just think it's worth bringing up because I don't know if the Bruins even know what they're doing with the player yet. He's obviously he's been struggling this year for the most part. So when you have a player that you're not close, when you have a pending UFA who's struggling, you're not close to on contract negotiations, and you have a bit of a logjam in the middle six, and this kind of ties into the McLaughlin stuff, like should he stay or should he go? I just think it's worth adding that to this conversation and see what you guys think about those reports out there.
It's my turn. No,
right,
it's my turn. It's my turn. I've been sitting here waiting. So I'll start with McLaughlin, then go to Frederic. But for McLaughlin, like, he 100% deserves to be on the team right now. And you can't really argue that he isn't a plus, like isn't helping. He may have, like, without him, you may not have 2 points yesterday. You may not even have 1 point yesterday. And we're at the point where they need as many points as they can get because they're right there on the bubble. So he has helped you win. He's got goals in back-to-back games. He should be on the team, but that's not necessarily how it works with the contract situation, because, if they didn't bring in Wahlstrom, I feel like I would be saying, oh yeah, he'll probably stick around. But it's because they have Wahlstrom now and they have Johnson waiting around that I feel like they're looking to send him back down before they have to risk the waivers. And he was a free agent signing, wasn't he, out of Boston College? The Bruins he finished up his career. I think he was the captain at the time, right? And then signed with Boston, which, kept him in the area. And he's been a
Olympian.
good addition. He was. That's a good point. Because the NHL hasn't been sending players to the Olympics, and they better keep their word that they're going to continue to do that. But yeah, like if it was based on merit alone, he'd obviously be with the team. But because of the situation that they have with the waivers and how he'd have to go back through them, I feel like he kind of is just gonna fall into like a victim of circumstance with that and get sent back down. And then you'll see Wahlstrom jump in the lineup. Is that what should happen? Is that what's best for the team? No. So
yeah, I actually I don't know if that is. I kind of think that might not happen, because to me, Wahlstrom and Johnson are more of the duplicates in terms of players. Like Brian mentioned, it's like those are guys who have to be in the top 9. Those aren't fourth liners. So, if you send McLaughlin down, then you pretty much have to drop Kastelik back to the fourth line. And then one of Wahlstrom or Johnson plays every night, and you hope that they click with, Frederic, Brazo, Coyle, whoever it is that they're on a line with. So, I mean, to me, I just think like that's kind of a little bit riskier in a way, in that like it takes away the option of bumping Kastelik up to the third line, which I think has been a good move for Sacco to have in his pocket, because Kastelik here in these last couple of weeks has pretty frequently been the spark on that third line.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable enough to, to not have your hand pushed or force your hand to putting him back with the fourth line when he's more effective, getting some energy out of Trent Frederic or, and Coyle or Brazo, whoever ends up being there. But yeah, maybe he will stay. I think they'd be better off with him staying, for sure. So it just becomes a, do you want him to stay around the whole year? I mean, I don't think we had it on our radar that Koepke was going to be around for as long as he has. And I would say that even Beecher's been quiet. Like, I know he's centering that line, so you'd have to, once again, probably have to send Kastelik down to center that line. But yeah, like there's plenty of reasons to keep him. And then to go to your Frederic's question, Brian, it kind of feels like we just, especially with Elliot Friedman's reporting, Frederic just keeps coming back up. And, that means that Sweeney's probably got his name out there to other teams and having open conversations about whether or not he'll stay in Boston and how to get value for him if you can on an expiring contract. So, but I don't see that necessarily affecting the current roster situation, because there are ways to solve this issue, and I'd be fine if the solution would be to waive Tyler Johnson. So
yeah, on Frederic, I think this is a lot more of other teams asking about him and leaking to Friedman that, like, hey, I had a phone conversation with Sweeney about Frederic, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean Sweeney's like actively shopping him. I think he's listening, absolutely, and I think if he got blown away, he'd pull the trigger on a trade. But what to do with Frederic is not a question that the Bruins have to answer right now. Like, the trade deadline's on March 7th. There is a lot of time between now and then to feel things out. Like, keep playing him, see if he gets going, see if things change on the contract front. And if you're still apart, and if you feel like, yeah, you know what, he's not an absolutely essential part of whatever it is we're going to do the rest of the season, or he can be part of a trade that helps us get an offensive upgrade, there's a lot of time to explore that route. So yeah, I think a lot of teams are asking about Frederic. Like, clearly there's been trades made this season. I feel like there's been more early season trades than like any season I can remember recently. So I think GMs are being more proactive when they see a guy who might be available. And when Sweeney says after firing Montgomery that basically like trades are going to be next if things don't turn around. Yeah, obviously like GMs are jumping on the phone being like, hey, Trent Frederic, what'll it take? Like, because he's an obvious name that would be available and would be, part of a potential shakeup. I don't know if I don't think Sweeney is itching to move him, because A, the team has started to play better, and B, there's still going to be an element of selling low on Frederic right now. Like, he's once again now gone, since he had that 2-goal game, like a week and a half ago, he's now once again gone 4 games without a point. So, yes, he's an intriguing player that teams want, but you're also kind of selling low where he's not playing the way he has the last couple years.
Well, you'd be selling low versus getting nothing in return besides cap space. I mean, so you get to a point where selling low is better than nothing. But here's the thing. So my initial sentiment on this, and I think part of it is just because I've been so disappointed in his play this year. He has not been good this year. My initial opinion, and I've since altered it a little bit, was if you're not going to come to a deal and you truly are that far away on a contract negotiation, and I agree, Scott, it's not something I have to figure out right now, but just because the reports were out there, it was on my mind. If you're not close to a deal on a pending UFA, and he's not an essential player, in my opinion, when he's playing like this, at least, to my point was, if you trade Frederic because you're not going to re-sign him and you get any sort of return back, and then you bow out in the first round because you don't have Trent Frederic, well, then you weren't good enough in the first place. That was kind of what my mindset was. If he's playing like this, which is, again, unfortunately, I can't sit here and give him the benefit of the doubt because he hasn't been a good enough player for long enough of his career where his good stretch is the norm. You understand what I'm saying? So I need to see him to get going. If he was playing like he was last year so far this year, then I would sit here and I would say, no, he's going to be an essential middle six guy in the playoffs. And he could be, but his play hasn't been encouraging, to say the least. However, in talking with people online after my initial tweet, I have kind of come back a little bit to look at compare the effect of keeping him as a rental versus a potential, return you get for him. So if a team is talking to you around a deadline and they want to blow you away, then yeah, I would trade him. But if the offers are underwhelming, and that underwhelming offer isn't better than keeping him as a rental for a playoff run and then getting his cap space in the summertime freed up to do something else, you got to wait. You got to weigh it. We just don't know those details at this moment, so it's definitely premature. It just depends on what teams are willing to offer, and then comparing that versus, is that better or worse than keeping him as a rental and then getting his cap space if we don't re-sign him?
Well, in the way I think of Frederic now, it's like you said, like, is he worth having him as a rental for your own team? Like, at this point, I don't even really know if the answer is yes. Like, it's hard because I feel like you look at Kastelik, and Kastelik does everything that you want Trent Frederic to do, and like Trent Frederic should just try to be Mark Kastelik at this point, because Kastelik he's got that grit. He seems to know when to push buttons, when to pull back so that he doesn't get any penalties. Like, he skates the line pretty well. He brings intensity, energy. He can fight. Like, that is who Frederic needs to be more like. And so Kastelik right now is doing the role that you kind of think of Frederic filling better. And I don't know how much you really lose. Like, you still have that element on your roster if you trade Frederic for something that maybe you need a little bit more.
Yeah, well, in theory, the difference there should be Frederic is a pretty sizably better offensive player than Kastelik, except he hasn't been this year because Frederic has 11 points, Kastelik has 10. So like, he hasn't even been separation in that respect, which, again, like, we've seen Trent Frederic score 17, 18 goals in this league, and I don't think Mark Kastelik's ever going to do that. Nor should he really be expected to. But that is what you expect of Frederic. He's obviously just, falling way short of that so far this season.
Yeah.
I think it's just a wait and see thing. Again, I don't think we'd be talking about it if it wasn't, a report out there. I think it was yesterday. So it was just worth bringing up. And yeah, there seems to be an abundance of middle six personnel and a shortage of top six, which we knew going into the year. It's not really a surprise, but you bring in Wahlstrom, you did sign Tyler Johnson. Marc McLaughlin's up right now, granted in a fourth line role. There just seems to be a lot of bodies, and they're still trying to figure that out.
I don't know if you guys have even thought about this, so it's fine if you haven't, but Trent Frederic's making $2.3 million right now. Do you guys even have like a number in mind of what you would go to, like at this point?
For to offer him
like for his next contract?
Goodness.
I mean, if he were to finish the year strong, like, I mean, I haven't put much thought into this, but and get back to kind of closer to what he produced that last year, or somewhere between last year and the year before, which would be what, 35 points. Like, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe 3-5 at most. Like, he's not a $4 million player in my opinion, and that's even that. I even feel uncomfortable saying that. But if he's producing at the level he can or has the last 2 years, maybe you can make the argument for closer to 4. But I'm not going anywhere near 4 at this moment.
That's probably why the report is that they're not in the same what was it, not in the same universe or whatever when it comes to what same stratosphere. Yeah, for what he wants or what his agent is, negotiating for him versus what the Bruins would be willing to pay.
Yeah, I think like that's exactly kind of where I am, where it's like if he was doing what he did last year, or even take obviously ideally taking a step beyond that, yeah, like I could go to 4 or a little bit more, but right now, yeah, it's like I would have a hard time offering more than 3 a year, and it's like that makes it very easy to understand where this gulf is, right? Because Frederic's probably starting somewhere above 4, thinking, like I deserve like almost to, or again, before this season, like I deserve to like almost double my salary. And the Bruins are like, wait, what are you doing this year to even like warrant much of a raise? And it's like, yeah, that creates kind of an enormous gulf. And it's like, Frederic hasn't done anything that would force the Bruins to come up from a low number. And if you're a player, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I've been struggling. Yeah, you know what? I'll knock $1 million off that. Like that's players are always going to believe like I'm right on the verge of turning it around. So like you're not gonna budge when you're kind of at your low point.
Yeah. I mean, if he went from 31 points in 22-23 to 40 last year, and then was on pace for 40 to 45 this year as a player who can play in your middle six, is responsible defensively, can put up those points, can fight when need be, like, okay, yeah, then I'll have a fair conversation about him getting 4+. But right now he's just not, he hasn't earned that. So quite simply. Now, I will say, guys, let me ask you this. Would you trade, or would the Rangers trade, or would the Bruins trade Trent Frederic for Kaapo Kakko straight up? And look, I'm not even saying that's a realistic thing. That's just more of a fun conversation on the podcast, because I think Kakko, surprisingly, and Frederic, I think have similar career highs in a given season for points. Or Kakko might have a slight edge. I have to pull it up.
Kakko's is 40.
And so is Frederic's, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 2 years ago, Kakko had 18 goals, 22 assists, 40 points.
So I don't have Kakko's contract up right now, but is that one of those like hockey trades where both teams could see potential benefits to it? Like Kakko is just stuck in the mud. By the way, he got healthy scratched in New York. If those don't know, he got healthy scratched for a game in New York. The Rangers are just plummeting right now. And it's an absolute circus. And he was very open about his displeasure about getting scratched, and how it's the younger players, even though he's a 6-year veteran, the younger players are getting singled out more. It's not a good situation. It's a classic like player probably looking for a change of scenery. And it's not so much that Frederic is in Boston, but you have a UFA on the horizon that isn't close to a contract. Maybe the Rangers want a middle six with sandpaper, and maybe the Bruins want to bring in a middle six guy, former 2nd overall pick, that maybe needs a different scenery to optimize his game.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, and I guess my hesitation here would be how many players, admittedly with some skill for sure, can you kind of try to reclaim in one season and like still expect to do anything at all? Because like you just brought in Wahlstrom. Like I worry like you end now. Look, you could potentially end up with a third line that has Kakko and Wahlstrom on it, and all of a sudden things click and they're scoring, and you're like, wow, the Bruins just completely transformed the third line and they're getting offense from now. And maybe one of those guys even jumps into the top 6 and you look like a genius. Like that could happen. You could also end up with, a third line where like both of those guys are struggling and you're like, oh crap, the change of scenery didn't help them. And now not only are we not getting any offense from them, but we're also not getting the sandpaper, grit, like defensive play. Like we've kind of lost everything. And now we have, a third line and a middle 6 with no identity whatsoever. I would be a little bit worried about that, but it's not a bad idea. Like Kakko definitely has some talent. It just hasn't fully taken off with the Rangers yet.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Rangers fans are displeased with him. So they're at a, I wouldn't say necessarily like the same situation as with Frederic, because I don't think Bruins fans are like, yeah, really like, who is this guy? Get him out of here, because Frederic's bar is different than a second overall pick. And yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Did you guys look up his contract? Did anybody look up how much his cap
money's basically even. Kakko's 2.4, and he's a pending restricted free agent, so there is also some team control there.
One other thing, guys, I want to mention real quick is, so Kaapo Kakko, honestly, guys, their career numbers are a lot more similar than one would think. I mean, they're both former first-round picks, but Kakko was second overall, and people thought Frederic shouldn't have been probably a first-round pick. But regardless, so Kakko has 131 points in 330 games, and Frederic has 105 points in 313 games. So Kakko is averaging 0.4 points a game, and then Frederic is averaging 0.34 points per game. So the edge goes to Kakko, and it's, not razor thin close, but close enough where you could see, because they're different styles of players and both would bring like a change to their each team's middle 6 that could be used, right? It's I don't know. It's something that I'm sure could be being explored at some point.
The more I think about it, I think I would do it. Like it just seems like a risk worth taking for me, to be honest. And even if it doesn't pan out, even if kind of what I laid out happens, like even though this team has started to play a little better, like I don't think they're really a true cup contender. So I don't know. You might as well throw a dart and see if you hit on something like that. So yeah, I think I would do it.
I was just looking up their minutes too, like their average time on ice over their careers kind of been similar. Yeah, he's not really a power play guy, so I don't really think, like, if you're looking for that, you might have to go somewhere else. But at the same time, like, Frederic hasn't really been a power play guy either. So yeah, I think that there's certainly an argument to be made that could benefit the Bruins, but you also have to think of the Rangers side. Like, are they ready to do that too? Are they done with him? Like, are they just looking for something different at this point? The answer might be yes, just based on all of the stuff they've done so far and just where they are as an organization right now, with trading away their captain and then, the bad stretch of play that they've had.
And maybe, I definitely think the Rangers are they're willing. I again, like, for those that don't know, there's been a lot of controversy and drama coming out of New York regarding the Rangers the last month, and Kaapo Kakko is the most recent story of it. I mean, he's a younger player that is unhappy with how he's being utilized. And Bridget, your point about him not being a major power play guy for the Rangers, I think that's, I wonder how much of that is a player that has the potential to be, but is battling confidence, and also historically battling for ice time in a high-powered Rangers offense like you've had Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad and Lafreniere, and just some other players over the years that you're battling. I mean, Adam Fox is obviously going to be running the power play, so there's been a lot of high end talent that Kakko has had to fight for that ice time. Maybe you come to a different situation in Boston, where right now Boston's kind of they're in need for some top six skill and raw talent. Sometimes it's about fit and opportunity.
Yeah, think about the Zacha for Hala trade. Like, those were two guys that needed changes of scenery. I think both teams were happy with how it worked out. I mean, the Bruins got Zacha, who's a 6th overall pick, and has been a top 6 forward for them, and versatile, and has, he's been a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. He plays on the top power play. Like, that trade worked out, and that was kind of a 1-for-1, like, hey, this guy for that, like this forward for that forward. We think Zacha can help us. It could be something similar, though. The contracts are a little bit less. Like Zacha, I feel like Zacha was a bit of a higher end guy than Kakko, but clearly back when he was drafted, like he was expected to have a really high upside, and it just hasn't happened yet. Is it possible that it does? And then like Wahlstrom too. Like Wahlstrom's another 1st-round guy. That he's interesting. I want to see how, what it looks like when he starts to play, because obviously Sacco kept the same lines from Vancouver, wanted to give it another run back because they played well. But when Wahlstrom gets in, probably next game, guys, I don't know, but just see how he fits, where he fits, who they take out. Yeah,
I kind of feel like he might roll with the same lineup again. I mean, why change the lineup when you're winning? Now he might keep the lines that he finished with, like keep that in-game switch.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking at Kakko's numbers, and like they actually used him more on the power play as an 18-year-old rookie than anytime since. He had 13 power play points as a rookie and 11 power play points in 5 years since then. So basically a non-factor on the power play in recent years.
Okay, guys, I know we have about 5 minutes left before we have to go. So any final takeaways?
It's time to argue about Christmas movies.
Oh boy. Okay, so I'll let Scott maybe tee this up, or Bridget. I know Rich Keefe had a tiers list.
Yeah, I'll start, because I was the one who started this argument before we started recording, because I disagreed with. Sorry, Keefe. Like, very sorry. I know you're a big movie guy. Respect all of your movie critiques. But why would you have Jim Carrey's version of The Grinch in the worst tier? Like,
because that's where it should be.
No, Scott. No, it is absolutely not. So he had Elf right at the top, which is where it should be. I love Elf. I love Will Ferrell. People have probably heard me say on this podcast multiple times how much I love Will Ferrell. And then, there's some that I agree with, but like I can't get over the Jim Carrey version of The Grinch being that low. It is hilarious. I laugh every time. My phone is full of memes from The Grinch. Like I was telling you, Brian, like the one where he says, dinner with me, I can't cancel that again. There's just a bunch of them. Like, so Scott, you're wrong. Sorry, Rich. I'm disagreeing with you. Scott's going to war for you, apparently, but
yeah, it's not a very good movie. I don't know what the issue is.
It's hilarious.
I don't know how you can watch that movie, see him get in that recliner, put his feet up, and just start chewing on glass and spit out the like. It's just a funny movie. I mean, if you want to put it in a second to last, I think last is harsh. Last is harsh for that.
Yeah, but like you got also when like you're doing tiers, it's like something's got to be down there, like you can't just have like everything kind of in the middle or higher.
All right, if every single holiday season I make sure that I watch Jim Carrey's The Grinch and Elf. The other stuff I mix in if time allows, but those two I always watch.
I would say the 4 absolute must. My Mount Rushmore that I have to rewatch every year is Home Alone, Christmas Vacation, Elf, and It's a Wonderful Life. My biggest disagreement with Keefe's tiers, and you can find these at Keith21 if people want to cross reference. He has It's a Wonderful Life in the second tier, which is just insane. Like, not only is it one of the best Christmas movies, it's one of the best movies ever made. Period. Like, it's probably one of my 20 favorite movies ever of any kind. An all-time classic for a reason.
Yeah, we should have called Keith for this. We should have got him on here.
I mean, Miracle on 34th Street, isn't that a classic too? And he has that in his last tier.
Yeah, but not as much of a classic as It's a Wonderful Life. I probably would have had that like a tier or two higher, the original one. But like I'm okay with that being at the bottom.
I think my problem looking at his tiers is that there's about probably at least 5 movies I just haven't seen. So it's tough to like really comment on those. But I mean, like Jingle All the Way is with like that's I feel maybe that's just like me being like a 90s kid, but I feel like that's kind of like a cheeky, funny movie. Like yeah, it's bad, but I don't think I would put it in the last tier because I've always enjoyed it. It's kind of funny. Christmas Story being in the second tier. I think people get sick of that because it's been on a marathon for the last 20 years on 2 channels. But back in the day before it was overexposed, I think that should be tier 1.
I think I'm okay with that in tier 2.
I mean, Bad Santa in tier 2. That's a bit. That's a little. I mean, I don't know. What do I know? What do I know?
The one that I think you overlooked that for me would at least be in the second tier. So he included like the old like Rankin Bass cartoons, the 30 to 45 minutes, whatever, like Rudolph and the original How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Frosty. The one that's missing to me is Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which that would be very high for me.
Another movie that isn't even listed, and it's kind of a sad movie, but it's also funny. But I think it's a good movie. Is The Family Stone? I don't know if you guys have seen that before.
I actually have not seen that.
It's a good movie. It's what's her name? Is it Diane Keaton? Diane Keaton. And then what's the Wilson brother? Not Owen. Ben Wilson.
Luke
Wilson. No, not the blonde one. What's his brother's name? Like the brunette.
Oh,
not the guy from Wedding Crashers. His brother. He's in like Old School and stuff.
Yeah, Luke.
Yeah.
Luke.
Oh, is his name Luke? Okay, yeah, Luke. Him, and then Sarah Jessica Parker and Rachel McAdams. It's a good movie.
He has Krampus on here. I've never watched Krampus. Krampus is creepy as hell.
Yeah, Krampus like could have been at or near the bottom for me.
I don't like horror movies. I don't like creepy stuff. I like funny stuff. So like all of my top tier stuff would be some sort of comedy.
Another one that I think someone called in and mentioned this on the show after they did this, and Keith said he hadn't seen it, but I would add as a modern classic that more people should see is Klaus on Netflix. Klaus. That movie is great. And like I don't know why it never really took off or didn't become more popular. But it's another animated one. The animation is great. Great story. I highly recommend that one.
So my biggest sin, and I'll probably get killed for this, if not by the listeners, by you guys. I've actually never seen Die Hard, and all I hear about Die Hard is how there's a huge debate about is it a Christmas movie or is it not. So that's all I know about it. So With that said, seeing it in the first tier kind of confuses me because if half people don't think it's a Christmas movie, how is it in the top tier? But I guess I'd have to see it.
Well, so Die Hard is one of my favorite action movies ever. I don't really consider it a Christmas movie, so like it wouldn't even be in here at all for me. But if you're going to include it and you're going to make it eligible, then it has to be top tier.
How is it so debatable? Why is it so debatable between if it's a Christmas movie or not?
So it takes place at Christmas, and the entire thing is centered around an office Christmas party.
Oh,
but Christmas, but other than that, like Christmas is not really central to the theme. Like it could have been like any other gathering at the tower that prompts this terrorist attack.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's probably wraps up, no pun intended, but that wraps up our Christmas segment. And I think that probably will do it. So the Bruins are playing the Oilers on Thursday night. So that's another late one.
Big
The
one.
last one for the while until the California trip.
Chance to decide, chance to make this a winning road trip, which, listen, the way that this trip started in Winnipeg and Seattle, if you can finish it with 3 straight wins and end with a win over the Oilers, who have won 8 of their last 10, I think you can kind of forget about Winnipeg and Seattle. Like, that would be an impressive turnaround.
All right. Well, they're going to be challenged on Thursday. We'll see if they're up for the task. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll talk to you on Friday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.